Welcome to In the News for February the 3rd, 2023. I am Brett Burney from appsandlaw.com.
And this is Jeff Richardson from iPhone JD. Happy February, Brett.
Happy February. It's like, I cannot believe we're a 12th of the way through 2023. It's like 0203 2023 today. I don't know why I keep looking at the dates so crazy as I do. Let's get right into it. How about some HomePod news? I know we talked about this last week, but I thought you did a great job of linking to some of the I guess the premiere reviews, right? We finally have the full reviews that have been out now from, I think, TechCrunch and Engadget and The Verge. Everybody pretty much says across the board, it sounds, Jeff, this sounds great. It's like, it's good that Apple brought this back.
Yeah, that's the big change from last week is that, last week we knew it was coming out, but today they're shipping, and the folks that have had them for a little while from Apple, that were seeded early reviews, they released their reviews this week. And so it's interesting to hear what people that have actually been using the new HomePod have to say.
Right.
If you're thinking about getting a big HomePod, and if you only have time for one review, I would recommend the one that you just brought up on your scron from The Verge, because it is incredibly comprehensive.
It is good.
And they did a nice job of dividing it between Chris Welch, who sort of talks about how it sounds, and then Jennifer Tuohy, who did sort of like some of the Siri commands and HomeKit and all that sort of stuff. Different people talked about what their expertise was. So on the sound, which of course is the big reason people want to get a HomePod, the reviews have consistently said that this thing sounds really, really great. And it's, in fact, I've heard over the past week, two different sets of commentary, sort of a buzz. I've heard some people sort of say, who needs a HomePod? It's 3 times as expensive as a HomePod Mini. Who needs all that nonsense? And then I've heard other people say, HomePod Minis are nice, but to really get that room-filling, robust sound with the nice space, the quality is just so much better. And I think that those are both perfectly appropriate opinions. It just depends upon what you want. If you don't need the loudest or the quote unquote best music quality, HomePod Minis are wonderful. In fact, frankly, if you don't care that much about music quality, maybe a simple Amazon Alexa that have pretty, crappy speakers, maybe that's fine for you. But if you want the Apple product, which is better than the Amazon's, is the Mini. But if you really want that full sound, it's the HomePod. And of course, to really experience it, you get 2 of them in the stereo pair.
I know.
Where they
one
do
isn't
such a
enough.
Nice job. Yeah, one is not enough. And again, that's $600, so it's not a nothing expense. Although people have been spending money on stereo speakers for a very, very long time.
True that.
So from a sound standpoint, it's good. And then everything else about it, they say the outside looks very similar to the prior model. But I think that's a good thing because it has an iconic look to it with the mesh, and it looks different from other speakers, and it's a look that I actually think looks very very nice in any room. It doesn't look plasticky or anything like that. But the internals are all new. It's got a much faster chip, the same one that they use in the Apple Watches, so it can do a lot of things. Siri is a lot faster. It does great processing of audio, of the microphone portion and sound. So really, it's just an all-around great review. The only knock of it is that, it is a little expensive, but that's because this is a product that is more expensive. If you get the similar Sonos, which you and I talked about last week, because Sonos have some advantages, you're paying just as much money for the nice Sonoses.
Absolutely.
So if you decide you're in that field, the HomePod's there. And then other things, some of the new features on it, like the temperature sensor, which of course was also recently enabled on the HomePod Mini. The tests have said that it does what it's supposed to do. It's accurate. The one thing that I heard is that sometimes if you have like a true thermometer in a room, it will respond to changes in temperature a little bit more quickly, whereas the HomePod might take a few minutes to sort of get up to speed. But nobody cares. Was it literally 71 degrees or 70 degrees? It's close enough and it'll catch up. So it's really, it's a nice product that a lot of people are going to love. And I think the best evidence of that is that although you will be getting one today if you pre-ordered it, and if you walk into an Apple store, you might be lucky enough to find one on the shelves. But if you go to place an order for one today, Brett, I think that they're not delivering for like another month. So Apple, there's a lot of demand for these things. And I think they're going to sell well.
Reading through these reviews, Jeff, it something just feels different. And I think in a good way. I think some of it is so many people really like that old HomePod, the original one that we talked about, that came in 2018. And then it was such a surprise, I think, to everyone that Apple, I think one of these articles even said they used the D word. They are what is it, deinstitution or what how do they say it in here, that they are truly getting rid of it, like they are discontinuing. Thank you. That's the D. Yeah. Discontinuing. Thank you. I knew it was going to come, but it's like Apple doesn't normally use a word like that. In other words, it was like written in stone. Like all hope was gone that happened. And so I don't, reading through some of those reviews, I feel that there's a tenderness there, I guess, from some of the reviewers, because a lot of them, even in this Verge, I think they were comparing the old HomePod that they still had that was maybe 3 or 4 years old, because they didn't get rid of them, right? A lot of people still have some of those old original HomePods because they liked them so much. Anyway, just my kind of reflection on that, to the point where I'm like, wow, this really is kind of a special little product, I think, for a lot of folks. And then just even going further, just quickly in this Verge, they were even talking about, if one isn't enough, you got to have two to experience that full stereo speaker sound. But then you even mentioned this, that you can connect them now like directly to your TV. I think somebody in the Verge connected
exactly what I was going to say next.
Their PlayStation, and that's just interesting stuff to me there too.
Yeah. In fact, that one is interesting because, first of all, in what it does is interesting. And second of all, what it might possibly mean for the future is interesting. So on the first part, this is this relatively new technology for home theaters called eARC. EARC, and it basically allows different systems to share sound back and forth. If you've got a new TV like the LG TV that I have and I've reviewed, it has it. And so the nice thing about it is you can have all of your peripherals plug into your TV, your game system, your cable, channels, whatever you're watching stuff on. It all goes into the TV, and then from the TV you use the eARC to plug into whatever your speakers are, and that way it will automatically send all the sound out to your speakers. And so if you have the eARC going into an Apple TV 4K, and you have your HomePods, like a stereo pair of them, or I guess you could just use one, but it won't be as good. But if you have a nice stereo pair right there in your TV room, connected to your Apple TV, they'll handle all the music from whatever the source it's coming from. And it took a little time to do it, which led The Verge to wonder in their review, would Apple have literally spent all this time on all this eARC stuff if they were going to only use it for this one HomePod? Or is this maybe, and this could be wishful thinking, but is this maybe mean that Apple has other interesting products in this category coming, whether they are, sound bars for a TV or just other home stuff? Right. I really love the home technology. And I especially love it when it comes from Apple because of all the care that they put into their products. Right. So I'd love it if Apple was selling even more than just the HomePods, or who knows, you hear rumors of a different version of a HomePod that maybe has a screen, much like you can get an Amazon Echo that has a screen, or one of the Google ones that have a screen. So, it would be great, I think, if Apple expanded the category even more in the future. So it's cool stuff.
The important question, Jeff, is Apple going to be selling a HomePod to you? You have HomePod minis already. Are you tempted on this HomePod?
Am I a little jealous of it? Sure, because I'm sure it would sound fantastic. But I'm perfectly happy with the sound of my minis. And perhaps the best thing for me, Brett, is to never have a full HomePod in my house, because that way I won't know what I'm missing and I won't feel too jealous. I will just continue to be happy with my minis, which have more than enough sound. Yeah. But I mean, they are very nice,
There is one other knock that I have heard about the HomePod, Jeff. Apparently you need to make sure you put the HomePod on a coaster. Did you see this? I think Marquez Bradley, I saw that. I didn't even have a clue about this, but apparently the older HomePods, it was something like if it's a non-treated surface or something, it will actually leave a little ring on the table. And he had this little video, TikTok video or so, that he was showing the rings. And I'm like, really? Like, just like you were talking about all the care that Apple puts into this. But I think he says, thankfully, the newest version, at least the white one that he was looking at, does not leave a ring. So thank you, Apple, for fixing
I've
the
actually
ring
heard
problems.
Just the opposite. Some of the initial reviewers that says that it does still leave a ring. Perhaps a good authority on this is our buddy David Sparks. He was remarking on this podcast just this morning that because David is not only a technology person, but he also likes to do woodworking. So he has the expertise in both fields. And
good.
from
We
his
should get him on.
experience, if you have a table that is like, most of the time, if you make wood or something nice, it's going to be coated with a polyurethane to sort of protect it and stuff. And then if you have a polyurethane seal on your wood table, it's going to be perfectly fine. The real problem, he says, is people that might have a table that just has like a wax coating or it's not treated or something like that. Then it can leave a mark. The original one could leave a mark. The new one could leave a mark. Just get a coaster or something like that if you're going to do that. So anyway, that's an interesting.
So Apple needs to make an Apple coaster.
Or I even reviewed a couple months ago, Brett. I don't remember if we talked about it in the podcast, but this cute little stand that I have for my Mini, because I actually do have a wood table where my HomePod Mini was just a little short on the table. So just to lift it a few inches, I have this little stand I found on Amazon. That I guess would also solve the. I don't know if they've got a similar stand for the big HomePod. So.
An Apple coaster. That's Apple's
Apple
next
coaster. There you go.
Next product. Okay, so you may not be buying a HomePod, but apparently you have purchased a couple of more security cameras. You were kind to share with our audience last week about the tragedy at your house being burglarized, but it had a little bit of a happy ending from a technology standpoint because you had security cameras already in your house. You were able to get a good picture of the perpetrator, and he was apprehended. So I was interested to see if you were going to talk about a little bit more about the Eufy cams, and then a little interesting twist that you linked to here today as well.
Yeah, so they've been in the news lately. First of all, yes, the cams worked great for me. We actually did order 2 more of them. I haven't installed them yet, but I'm going to put them in this weekend just to get a couple more angles. But I was just so happy with what happened. But one issue with Eufys is whenever you have these security cameras, no matter what company you buy them from, you always want to be concerned about privacy. Now, especially if you have an indoor camera that might be looking at, certainly a bedroom or something like that. And some of these camera products, the way that they work is they connect to the internet, to the proprietary website of the manufacturer, which is nice because it means that you could view the images from somewhere else yourself. But it always opens up the possibility of, could somebody who I don't want looking at my videos, could they do it? And one of the things that the Eufy cameras have had going for them is that they don't normally go to the internet. All the video is stored locally in your house on a device. And what many people do is they only enable viewing via the internet through HomeKit, which has tons of security. So that way you're in good shape. The thing about the Eufy cameras, though, is there is an optional feature that you could enable it to be able to view things over their website. And if you did have that enabled, although Eufy claimed that everything was encrypted end to end, they made a mistake. They made a mistake that was discovered by people from speaking of the Verge once again. And people from the Verge figured this out last year, or at least their sources did. And when they pressed Anker, which is the parent company of Eufy, when they pressed Anker about it, Anker's initially response was unfortunately a little bit of denial when perhaps they should have been a little bit more forthcoming. But, the good news at the end of the story is everything has now been confirmed. Anker has figured it out. They've confirmed that they were incorrect earlier with what they said. And, they're addressing the issue. They're fixing the specific flaw. And they're also taking some steps like, doing some additional security things and hiring some new people to try to look out for flaws like this in the future. So, I know of 0 cases where it was actually exploited in the wild. But obviously, even just the possibility. So you want some security. I still think that the Eufys are a good approach because they sort of inherently are more private than some of the other cameras. But, you just have to make a decision going forward of how you want to go. And as I mentioned last week, that the newest Eufy cams, the 3s, actually don't currently work with HomeKit, which is a downside, which is why I actually purchased the older Eufy Cam 2 when I replaced them. So it's a kind it's interesting. You want security, but you also want privacy. Some people decide to share their cameras with,
you want convenience.
The police. You want convenience. That all of these things are competing, and there's no perfect. What's going to be right for one person is not right for another person. You just need to decide what's right for you. It's a lot of choices.
Well, I've watched the Mission Impossible movies, so I know it's possible, to hack into the security cameras like that. But thank you, Verge, and the author of this article is Sean Hollister and his team. Thank you,
Good
Sean.
Reporting.
I love this first paragraph. Anker at first said it was impossible. Then he said it covered its tracks, and then they repeatedly deflected. So he goes something about we told Anker that we would publish a story about the company's lack of answers if they didn't answer our questions. And then the next sentence is, it worked. In a series of emails to The Verge, Anker has finally admitted its Eufy security cameras. I mean, I get it from a business perspective. You certainly don't want to have a black eye like this, but good on Anker. Well, first of all, good on The Verge for pushing this. And at least Anker, and in fact, Sean, I think, published all of the conversations he had with somebody's security or global head of communications at Anker. I mean, it's best to come clean about this and say, this is what we're working on. And so I thank you for linking to that article. It makes me feel a little bit better.
It was just last week or maybe 2 weeks ago, we were talking about the last pass hacks.
Yes.
And I mean, the hacks was a problem, but a secondary issue was communication. And so, when it comes to things like privacy and security, I know it's difficult to be forthright, but, obviously we as customers want the companies that we buy things from to just tell us what's going on.
All right. So maybe something a little less spy invested. Let's talk about note taking.
Yeah.
But it's important, right, for us on a day-to-day aspect. Now, really, I think I'm so glad you bring this up because this is one of my favorite topics. In fact, I'm going to work with another a client of mine a little bit later today on this exact question. Is typically using the iPad to take notes, both typed notes as well as handwritten notes. And so obviously you and I are in the legal industry. And so, taking notes, typically on a yellow legal pad, it's something that everybody carries around with them. And that was the question a lot of times that I get from a client. Like, I want to replace my yellow legal pad with an iPad. Now, I know you, Jeff, and I know many years ago you did this. And in fact, I look to you often to see, how can you integrate the iPad into your workflow to take notes? Now, I know that you use an app called GoodNotes. I actually use an app that is very similar. In fact, you and I talk about this quite a bit. That's called Notability. They're very similar, lots of overlap on both of these. In fact, I think they're very good on the competition because you just talked about the app adding audio recordings in GoodNotes earlier this week, which is something that Notability has had for many years.
Forever.
In fact, GoodNotes was always able to, or for a long time, was able to search your handwriting to, as long as it was good. Notability couldn't, but then they came and, competed with that feature not too long ago. So thanks for adding this today. It's good to see some updates both in GoodNotes and in the Notability app today.
Yeah, it's nice to and I've used a number of these different apps over the years, ever since I first started using an iPad in 2010. So, for a very long time now.
Yeah,
the one that I've been settled with for the last few years has been GoodNotes, but if something better comes along, I'll certainly take a look at that as well. But the audio recording feature is something that, as I've mentioned, not for my personal practice, it wasn't something I was looking for, but for students, I know it's really important. You want to be in a lecture and listening to someone speak. You want to have a recording of it and while you're taking notes. And the advantage of that is that normally you're just going to review your notes because that's a much faster way to review what was said. But if there's a place where you're looking at what you wrote down and you're like, gosh, I don't know that this makes sense to me. Like, maybe I didn't write the whole thing down or something like that. You could, from that very point in GoodNotes now, you can just hold down on those words and a little pop-up menu appears. And one of the choices is to play the audio. And then you can actually listen to, and it goes back a few seconds, you can listen to what was said or what was recorded from the iPad at the time that you were taking that specific note. And then hopefully if you listen to the teacher or the person giving the presentation and you hear them say it again, you're like, oh, okay, when I wrote down the word X, I did, okay, what I really should have written was Y, and here's what this means. So I totally understand the value of this feature. I just have often environments where it doesn't really make sense for me to have audio recordings, but I've tested it and it does work. And I even ran a test where I recorded for like a full 30 minutes and I tried to see, did it make a very big difference in the file size? Cause I wasn't sure how much space it takes. And it made a negligible
they compress
difference.
that pretty good.
Yeah. They compress it a lot. I'm sure, after, dozens and dozens and dozens of hours that will start to use a little bit of your iPad space, but frankly, audio, doesn't take up as much space as video and other things. So.
Well, I am thrilled to see that GoodNotes has this option. I'll tell you just quickly for Notability, I don't do the recording when I'm working with a client or somebody like that. But where I do use it many times is if I go to a conference and I'm listening to a presentation and I'm taking notes on a certain presentation. For you and I, we have continuing legal education. So, we're supposed to be paying attention, but I got to tell you, sometimes Notability lets me be a little bit lazy because, I'd start daydreaming, but I hear something's important, but I didn't catch all of that. But I had Notability recording the audio. So I'll just make a quick little like circle or a star or something on the notes, Jeff, so that like I know that was something I should have been paying attention to. But what's neat about Notability, and I'm sure GoodNotes either does this now or will do it, is that when you tap at a certain place in your notes, whether they're typed or handwritten, it'll start playing the audio, but then it'll start redrawing the notes from that point. Like it just goes back, and it's kind of fun and neat.
It is sort of fun. I agree. Yeah.
When I show people that option, they're like, "Wow, I did not know that." It would do that. And like you said, it looks cool. I don't use it all the time, but it is a little fun. So that's GoodNotes. And quickly, you link to an update on Notability, which I think if you're in the artist aspect, this would be really, really fantastic on here. Mm-hmm. It looks like it's just something new that they're adding from the Apple Pencil, which is a stylus, but now you can use it more like a lead pencil.
Right, it's a little confusing because the feature's called
right?
pencil.
Yeah. I know there's too many words in here, but this was a good little feature that Notability released on here as well.
Yeah, and the thing that they did nice about it is that not only does it mean that as you draw with this tool turned on, it looks like a graphite pencil, which is fun for like drawing sketches and stuff like that. But they actually did it the more complicated way where they're using vector graphics, which means that if you draw something small and you make it bigger, it won't be like all pixelated and stuff like
not
that.
Pixelated,
it's actually
exactly.
vector, so it'll grow bigger. Yeah. So it's a nice, all of the, the perfect use of this is definitely for artists. So if that's you, then you'll enjoy using this feature. Yeah, but even if you're just, doodling in the side of your notes and just for the purposes of emphasis, you're taking notes in a conference or a meeting, and you just want to put some things just to make it look different, you could switch to this pencil and have it sort of stand out a little bit more. There's nothing wrong with that. So
I think you and I would agree that the Apple Pencil itself is probably the best tool from a stylus perspective you can use for the iPad. I love this review from Ed Hardy. Reviewing a company that I know you and I are pretty fond of from many years ago, Adonit, Adonit. They started making styli for the iPad even before Apple, because originally Steve Jobs said, you don't need anything to use the iPad. Don't need a keyboard, don't need a mouse, don't need a stylus. Now Apple, of course, offers all of those things and support them. But Adonit was making some excellent styli way back in the day. But this one takes the cake. I might have to get this one here. The Adonit Star.
As soon as I saw that, the first thing I thought of is, when I graduated from law school, I remember getting like a Mont Blanc pen, which has sort of that signature at the very top of it, that sort of a star shape. Is it just a coincidence that Adonit is also calling this the Star and making it look so much like this Mont Blanc pen? But but if you like that look, which is certainly a classic look, and in fact, when you take the tip off of the this particular Adonit stylus, it even sort of looks like it's a fountain pen, although it's really a stylus pen. So it's a cool looking stylus that again, I presume Adonit styluses usually work well. So I presume that this one will also work well. Yeah. But it does have that more distinctive Mont Blanc-esque look, although Adonit will never say those words, I'm sure, to avoid being sued. Of course. But it looks like a cute looking stylus.
Thank you.
One of my all-time favorite styluses, by the way, is my old, number 2 pencil stylus.
Oh, of course.
Stylus on the tip, but it looks like a number 2 pencil. So if you want to sort of look like the pencil, you can have this. If you want to have the Mont Blanc look, you can get this one.
I think I'm just going to get it because I just want to see people's reactions when I use it, Jeff. I mean, it's like, what are you using? A fountain pen on you're going to scratch your iPad. Oh, I got it handled. Don't you worry. Thanks, Ed Hardy, for spending another $50 of my dollars there. That's not going to be fun, but that is so cool. That made my morning, like watching that. So another day, another story about Apple helping you find your lost items. I saw this in a couple of other places today. We talked about the AirTag helping travelers find their suitcases. But what if it's not a full suitcase? What if it's a tiny little wallet? Can the AirTag help with that? Yes, sir, it can.
Well, maybe it can, because from what I understand, I don't know that he's actually recovered his wallet yet. This story came from his Twitter account. So this gentleman was on a plane. He left his wallet on the plane, which
on the plane, right?
Never want to do. I don't know why he took it out. Maybe put it in the seat pocket or something like that. But it had an AirTag in the wallet. It makes your wallet sort of thick, but you can do that. So he told the airline, hey, I left my wallet in the plane. The airline comes back and says, we searched, we cleaned the plane, we searched it, we can't find your wallet.
Bottom.
It's not there, not there. Well, because of the AirTag, he then watched the plane travel to 35 different cities.
He said 35 cities, exactly.
So his wallet is enjoying flights around the country, if not the world.
It's a lot of miles racking up.
And to my knowledge, because the last time I looked at his Twitter account again last night, because he's gotten so much attention for this, I'm sure that he will tweet when he recovers it, but he hasn't tweeted that yet. So I think his wallet is continuing to fly around the country. Who knows? I mean, maybe it fell down and got
between the
corner
seats
of the plane. Between the seats, something that they're not finding yet. If he could just get on that plane again with his iPhone, he could make it beep and find it, But who knows?
Get on that, American Airlines. Find that. Well, thankfully, while American Airlines is searching for lost wallets, there are emergency personnel in Canada that are able to find people. This was another excellent story, I thought. One of apparently these two ladies ended up off the main road in a snowbank. They couldn't move the car, but one of them, the passenger or so, had an iPhone 14, and they didn't have cell phone service, I don't believe, but they were able to use the satellite feature on this, Jeff. This is great.
This is one of those examples of they were traveling on the main road and there was an issue and Google Maps suggested taking an alternative route.
Right.
So they took it, but Google Maps did not know that route had a huge snow, all the snow on it.
It was only partially plowed is what happened.
And so their car ends up going into a snowbank and they were stuck. And so, the good news of this particular story is that they used the iPhone 14 satellite feature to call 911 for help and they were saved. So that's the good news. What I thought was interesting about this feature is you and I have spoken in past weeks that some people are worried that these sorts of technologies might put an undue burden on rescuers, whether it be through false calls or something like that. Whereas these rescuers were saying that this was great because what often happens is people go missing and all they know is where they were last seen and where they were going, which means they have a huge area. And so they have to use so many resources to look for the people. Whereas with this, because there's a precise GPS, this is exactly where the people are and you can communicate with them, albeit slowly. They don't have to waste time looking at a big area. They can just go very specifically to the target area, which means they're more likely to be able to help the people because they can get there sooner. They can use less resources. So it was nice to see that they were very complimentary of this new feature. And of course, it was great news for the women that were trapped. Thank goodness that they were brought to safety.
Dwight Yoakam, a senior manager with British Columbia Search and Rescue, called it a game changer for exactly what you were describing there. That's wonderful. iPhone 14 satellite service. I guess the sad thing that I was reading that story, Jeff, I'm like, well, I'm glad it was an iPhone 14 and not an iPhone 13, right? Or an iPhone 12 or not that, hey kids, you don't need to use that as an excuse to get your parents to upgrade your phone or anything. Or maybe it is. I'm just saying. It's like,
well, the nice 14, thing is right now it's only the newest phones that have it. But 4 years from now, Brett, everybody's going to be using all iPhones. People are going to upgrade eventually. And we'll get to the point where everybody has this feature.
Here's an app that I know you've mentioned before. I've never used this, but I know that you're fond of it. And there was a little bit of news on the Motif app, Motif. You reviewed this back in 2019.
Yeah. My original encounter with this was not the Motif app, but originally Apple itself, when back in the days where the Apple computer program was called iPhoto, now it's called Photos. But when it was iPhoto, Apple had a built-in ability to create greeting cards, use your pictures to make a card or to create books. Now, behind the scenes, Apple was actually working with this company Motif, but at the time you would order them just through the iPhotos app on your computer. And I started making them when my kids were like a year old. And so I've got 15 years of these books that I would make at the end of each year. I would always give them to my parents as sort of a Christmas present. And it's like, some of the best pictures of the past year involving the kids. And they were especially really fun when the kids were young and cute. Yeah. So now Apple removed that from iPhotos years ago. But again, the same company, Motif, continued to make them. And there was a competitor too, which is Mimeo, right? And
I believe so.
Right? Yep. Yes, Mimeo. Yeah. And so I remember when Apple stopped the feature years and years and years ago, I said, well, as I continue to make these books every year, will I use Motif or will I use its competitor Mimeo? And I decided to use Motif, and I've been a happy user of it ever since. The new thing, and what I reviewed a couple of years ago, is you can now create these books on your iPad, which I've been doing that pretty much ever since the app came out. So I continue to make these year-end books, or I made one book that's got like Mardi Gras pictures over the years of different friends and family members that have been at our house for Mardi Gras. Now that we're in Mardi Gras season right now in New Orleans. And so it's a great coffee table book that we put out every year. If, between parades, people are hanging out at our house, having a drink, getting a snack, you can look through pictures of, old Mardi Gras. And it's nice to have this physical book in your hand. And they're very easy to put together on your iPad, where you can just drag photos in and out. So I really like this service. I like the product. The news this week is, I guess the market wasn't big enough to have the both companies. Right. So Motif was purchased by Mimeo. And as Adam Engst reports, that for the time being, you can continue to use either app, but behind the scenes, it's going to be the printing services that Mimeo has that creates the books. I presume they'll look the same as before. And as long as somebody's out there with still offering the service, that's what matters to me, because no one's more digital than me, Brett. I love digital pictures. I love looking at pictures on my TV and my iPad and everything else. But sometimes it's nice to have that book in your hand. You open it up, you glance through it, you sit with, share it with someone else.
You got a picture of it here, which
tell
is just
stories.
Really cool.
Yeah, it's a perfect example. There's something to be said for these. And when you have like a big book with a full page image, it's great. It looks really, really good. So
well done. Hopefully they'll stick around. Now we just talked about AirTags in helping a gentleman find a wallet. We talked about AirTags helping people find their lost luggage. This is a story. I remember when the AirTags came out, we talked about this. People asked this question: hey, could I put an AirTag in the collar of my dog so that when the dog runs away or goes missing, I will be able to track the dog? Mm-hmm. And I remember at the time, Apple, I don't know if they officially formally said this, but they're like, yeah, probably not the best use of the AirTag. But that's not going to stop people from trying, Jeff.
Yeah. and there's all these, all these things you can buy on Amazon, AirTag collars for your dogs.
Right.
And they do work. I do read stories about people saying my dog ran away.
Right.
Now, obviously, the dog would have to be near somebody with an iPhone, but there's iPhones everywhere. And you can track a lost dog with an AirTag. But as this article points out, the problem is that if a dog, especially if you have the AirTag sort of hanging from the dog's collar, if the dog can get to it, they have these examples of dogs eating and chewing on the AirTag, which has got like a lithium battery, and that's not good.
Yep.
And in fact, the article points out that even if your own dog can't get to the AirTag, another dog that's sort of playing with your dog could grab it off. So I guess the moral is, I was just going to say that if you still decide to do this, even though Apple doesn't recommend it, there are some dog collars that I've seen where the AirTag is actually better flush with the actual collar, as opposed to dangling from the end of it. Maybe that would reduce the chance of a dog consuming the AirTag.
The beginning sentence of this, and it's Wall Street Journal, so I know this is a quick bonus tip. If you subscribe to Apple News, you can open the link in Apple News or find it there, because it usually is behind a paywall. But the beginning sentence is: Colin Mortimer, who is the owner of this dog, knew there was trouble when his dog Sassy started beeping. Apparently, they went through this whole thing. They could hear they could see that the dog, the AirTag was beeping. They could see that the AirTag was lost. They went around the entire apartment trying to find this, and they couldn't understand why they couldn't find the AirTag until they finally took it to the veterinarian. And here, the Wall Street Journal even comes complete. Thank you for the comprehensive coverage here, complete with an X-ray of the dog showing the AirTag in the stomach of the dog here.
You don't really need to read the article. If you just look at the picture,
just look at the picture. Exactly.
Picture that speaks 1,000 words. This X-ray is all you need to know.
I loved it when they finally got it out. Later on in the article, there's a picture of once they finally got it out. There's just a few bite marks on it. Like he tried to chew it up a little bit before. Anyway, the other thing quickly that it just made me reminded of, that we've talked about this in the past, is you said lithium battery and the bitter ink coating. You know where I'm going with this. Some lithium batteries, because it looks like a Necco wafer or something like that little kids could possibly ingest them. That's a big no-no. So sometimes companies will put a bitter ink coating on those lithium batteries, but those don't happen to actually work in the AirTag. So just kind of a weird little flipping around there. Good stuff. All right. In the know. app or my tip today, I'm going to talk just quickly about installing fonts on your iPhone or your iPad. Now, really the only time that I do this, Jeff, is if I'm going to give a presentation somewhere, right? I typically will create a presentation on my Mac or my Windows machine, and I'll use some fun fonts sometimes in those presentations. I don't like to use Comic Sans or Times New Roman all the time.
Mhm.
Sometimes they're okay and appropriate. But when I move that presentation over to my iPad, because I like to use my iPad to give a presentation, right? The font doesn't always come with it. Especially this is in Keynote. Sometimes the way you can save the presentations in PowerPoint or so that they'll come with it. And so when I import it into my iPad, Keynote will open and say, oh, what do you want to do? We don't have these fonts. What do you want to replace it with? And a lot of times they'll just default to not a fun looking font on there. And I don't like that. So all through the years on the iPad, there has been kind of a hackery way to get fonts onto the iPad, and that involves creating profiles on the iPad. Now, this is the only time I've ever done profiles, other than maybe like sometimes I can use it to install a beta app or something like that. But you go into your settings and you go to profiles, and you have to jump through about 4 or 5 different warnings that, hey, you're creating a profile. Are you sure you want to do this? Won't get into all the security issues on that, but it's in due course that they are saying this could be a security issue here if you install a profile. But that was the only way that you could get a font on there. You can still do that, but in iOS 13 several years ago, Apple did allow some fonts to be installed through the settings app. If you go into settings and go to general, you'll see there is a fonts option. Now, for most of us, it's probably going to be blank. There's no fonts listed in that fonts, because what you have to do, and I'll link to a couple of articles that'll kind of walk you through this if it's something that you might care about, but you have to get a separate app. One of those is Font Diner. That's why I'm showing this today. There's a couple of others. There's actually one called a Creative Cloud from Adobe. You don't have to have an Adobe account. You have to have a free account. You don't have to have a paid account. A little confusing there. But Font Diner, completely free. You download this app, and you can purchase fonts through the app. A lot of people think, well, fonts should be free. Well, that's not true. People design those fonts, and you have to purchase them. And there's a lot of sites out there that you can do this. But if you download the Font Diner app, there are about 20 or 23 fonts that are free that they insert into there that you can use anywhere you are. And once you install Font Diner and tap on the that first little area where it says it's like a packet of fonts. Once you do that, it does then show in that general font setting in there. In other words, you can go into your settings app, go to general, go to fonts, and then you can actually toggle ones on and off that you want to show. But these are kind of fun. I wouldn't use this, to create an email message, but you can use it in things like Microsoft Word. You can use it in, Keynote or a PowerPoint presentation or something along those lines. Now, the limitations, just lastly here, this is only for something like in a creative aspect, right? Keynote, PowerPoint, I'm sure you could probably use it in something like GoodNotes or Notability as well.
Microsoft
But
Word.
you can't, yeah, exactly. You cannot use these to change the system font on the iPhone or the iPad. Like some people want to change the little, your app names, for example, and put that in. No, Apple doesn't allow that. I'm sure there's many security issues on there. But the Font Diner app, and there's a couple of others, and I'll put some additional links in the show notes that you can go, that this would maybe be fun if you just wanted, you're setting up a document or making a poster or something on your iPhone or your iPad. You can go do that. Font Diner is completely free, and then they got about 20 fonts in there that are free. And if you want more, you can purchase more through the Font Diner app as well, and then those would also be available in your settings app. So you can still do that profile side if you dare. And there are some security issues I've never run into because I've done that many times, but it is a little confusing, the hoops that you have to jump through there. It's just a little too much. And Apple wouldn't like you to do that as much, although it is still available. But I would recommend start with this Font Diner, see if it's something that you want to use, and then reach out to me. If you want to do more fonts, I could help you out with that as well. But that's my tip for today.
For folks who have been looking at who are listening to this podcast just on the audio version, you're sort of missing out, because on the video version, you'll see that, Brett, you're showing off all these different fonts, and they're really cool looking. Those are just the free ones. I'm going to have to try this to try it out. I haven't played with fonts a lot on my iPad, but when I have, I've used a different app called Any font, and I've had it
That's
installed
what I
on my
use.
iPad for
Yes,
a
sir.
very long time. It does
Yeah,
use the profiles and stuff like you were talking about,
exactly.
but it's been a long time since I've used it because, like you
Right,
say, for the purposes of my iPad, really, it's just for presentations that it's been a big deal for me.
right. That's right.
But I'm gonna have to check this out, even just for the purpose of trying some of these free fonts, because the ones that you're showing are pretty nice. I could definitely
Yeah,
see using
the
these.
AnyFont, yeah, exactly, Jeff. The AnyFont app, I know you and I have talked about this even on presentations we've given together. That is exactly the app that I've continued to use. But in order to use it, you have to have that font somewhere. Like I've purchased fonts before, right, from other places, and I store them in like a Dropbox folder. So then I can use the AnyFont app to find that font, and then I can load that in through the profile. But you can still do that. That app still works. But if you're not as comfortable with that, then just try this Font Diner app out. It's completely free. It's got a pack of free fonts there, and see if it's something that you're interested in.
That's cool. Thank you for sharing that. So my tip of the day was something, as we discussed at the beginning of the podcast and last week as well, security cameras have been on my mind a lot more lately because of the incident at my house. And one of the things that I noticed was my daughter, as we were talking to her, she's a high school freshman. She was telling me that she wanted to be able to, just for security, if she wanted to look at the security cameras. And I told her, sure, yeah, you can do that. Just on the Home app on your iPhone or on your iPad, you could, because they're HomeKit, you could look at them. And she told me something that I thought was strange. She said, well, I can do that, Dad, but I can only see a live view from the cameras. I can't see, the cameras will automatically record for a minute if it senses a person going by, or sometimes it's just a dog or a cat walking through the yard will pick that up. She said, I can't see the old recordings. And I'm like, I have no idea why. So I found the solution to it. I just sort of happened upon it. And goodness, I mean, this just shows that there are so many hidden settings hidden away that you would never know where to look for it. So the solution for this, and there's actually some other things you can do there too, is if you're using, so go to your Home app. This is the person that's in control of the HomeKit for the phone, which is me in my house. You go in your Home app. At the very top of your Home app, and Home app at the top right, there's like a circle with 3 dots in it. And so if you tap in that, you'll see an ability to go into settings, Home settings. And then from within Home settings, there's an option called People, and it's got all the people in your home who you've given access to HomeKit. So for me, it's me, my wife, and my two kids. If you tap on any individual person, like I tapped on my daughter, then I saw that there was an option for cameras to either stream only or stream and view recordings. I had no idea that, I didn't set any of this up, and I have no idea why my wife was set up that she could both stream and watch recordings, but my 2 kids were only set up for streaming. Is it maybe because since Apple knows their age, did Apple by default decide that a teenager should not see? I have no idea why it was set that way. So of course I changed it. And so now they could go back. So keep in mind, just also before you change this, if you find yourself in a situation, think through the implications. If every time someone walks into the house, there's a little recording of it that's saved by Apple for, I don't know, 3 months, 6 months, whatever, that you can view via HomeKit, if it's close to, your kid's birthday time and you don't want to see a picture of, you don't want them to go back and see a recording of you walking into the house with their brand new bicycle or whatever it is, I just keep that in mind. They'll be able to see past recordings. But that was an option I didn't know that was there. While I was there, I saw a bunch of other things too. Like, for example, one of the settings that I found is in the same area of home settings. There's something called music and podcasts, and it says update listening history. Apple keeps track through Apple Music of things that I listen to and uses that to suggest other songs. But one of the things I noticed is that it will add to my listening history through HomePods, something we also talked about today. And for mine, we have the HomePods downstairs, and I've got that turned on. But my daughter also has a HomePod in her room, and whatever it is that she listens to, she has pretty good music taste, but that's certainly not my personal listening history. So I could go and I could deselect her HomePod so that whenever she listens to things in her room, it's not going to be added to the AI of Apple thinking about the songs that I like to listen to over and over again. Because believe me, Brett, when my daughter likes a song, she listens to it about a bajillion times in a row. So it absolutely would take over my preferences. So I went ahead and turned that off for her HomePod. So, but that's just an example of, there's so many little settings that you wouldn't even think to look in these places for them. So I was happy to find the solution to my problem. I was happy to learn about other new settings I did not even know that existed. So,
and this is all in the Home app, right? Everything you've been talking about is the Home app, which is
I didn't go to the settings app. I'm
Yeah.
in the Home app and then
Yeah.
settings from within the Home app. Yes.
Yeah. And I got to tell you, I just have not explored the Home app very much. This is a default app now that comes with the iPhone or the iPad. I forget how long ago it was that they put it in.
Yeah, I forget.
But I mean, number one, I've said you're always a little ahead of the curve on the home automation. I'm not quite there yet, although we do have like a thermostat and a couple of other things that I've done. But I control that usually through different apps, or the app that comes with it. But I could also control it from within the Home app. I know I'm going to get there. I feel like the second point is Apple needs to get a little bit better on the treadmill here, getting into some of the home automation things. And I think it's getting there. Like I think the HomePod may be one of the first that can go in. I was listening to another podcast where they were just saying, wouldn't it be great if like, why doesn't Apple make like a sound bar, right? For like a TV, you incorporate the Apple TV in and like a HomePod. I mean, there could be so much more that they could be doing, but I know they drag their feet on this for many good reasons, I'm sure, but that's really cool. Thanks for the tips on the Home app. Whew, okay, that was a lot today. Thanks, Jeff, for your time as always, and we'll talk to you next week.
Sounds good. Thanks, Brett. Bye-bye, everybody.